11 years, one freaking email. That's all it took to pull the pin. No face-to-face, no conversation, no fight. Just an email that popped up at 10:42 a.m. while I was making coffee in a quiet house I paid for, in a life I built. I wasn't even mad at first, just still. Like someone hit pause and forgot to unfreeze the moment. My name's Nathan Ryland. I'm 42, Executive Director of Strategic Growth at Valorix Partners, a boutique consulting firm that scaled mid-market manufacturing companies into acquisition-ready monsters. I've been there 9 years, helped grow it from a 6-man operation out of a subleased office to a 10-figure valuation. I know leverage, I know patience, and I sure as hell know what it means when someone shows you who they really are. She wrote, "I deserve more. I moved the inheritance into my personal account." I stared at those lines for a full minute, then another. I didn't refresh, didn't blink, just felt something fold over inside me. 11 years married, 14 together. And this was how she chose to cut it loose? From a so-called women's empowerment weekend out in Sedona, some overpriced spiritual retreat with candlelit confession circles and chakra-cleansing smoothies. I'd only half listened when she pitched the trip last month. Something about realignment, group journaling, womb wisdom. I figured it was another of her self-discovery kicks, the kind she cycled through whenever life got too quiet, the silent retreats, the herbal detox, the Finding Your Wild Woman book club that ended with wine and more gossip than growth. But this wasn't another phase. This was a play. I replied exactly one sentence. "Thanks for the heads up." No exclamation, no venom, just that. And then I closed my laptop, walked to the sink, and poured the rest of the coffee down the drain. It was already cold. Here's the thing about Michelle. She was always looking for something bigger, not necessarily better, just louder, something that made her feel like she mattered. I met her when she was 25, still in grad school, drowning in student loans and idealism. I was already 5 years into corporate life, a decade past my screw-up phase. I saw her ambition before she did. She had the drive, but none of the structure. I gave her both. When she wanted to quit her nonprofit job to start a design business, I backed her. Wrote the first check. Built the website. Ate takeout for 8 months while she figured it out. When she wanted space to find her voice, I gave it. Hell, I even built her an art studio in the garage so she wouldn't have to lease one. That space is probably still covered in half-finished canvases and dried-up acrylics. She used to say I was her anchor. Later, she said I was holding her down. There were signs. I'm not stupid. The distance. The sudden emotional fluency after years of surface-level talk. The curated Instagram captions about growth and divine timing. And the way she'd started treating me less like a partner and more like a piece of furniture she was tired of dusting. I just didn't expect her to detonate the bridge from 800 miles away with that smug little sentence about deserving more. I checked the joint accounts. Nothing moved there, but the inheritance, that was different. My father passed 2 years ago, and the trust distribution had been slow and complicated. When the first lump hit last spring, I made the mistake of putting it in our secondary savings account. Her name was on it. I meant to move it. I didn't. And she fucking knew that. My lawyer had warned me back then, but I brushed it off. We were solid, I thought. Sure, we had our cold seasons, but every marriage does. Or at least that's what I told myself when she started sleeping with her phone face down and leaving early for wellness coaching. She never wanted me to attend. Now I knew better. I sat down in the kitchen, looked out the window, and felt that eerie quiet again. Not rage, not heartbreak, just clarity. A hard, surgical kind. The kind that replaces hope with decision. She thinks she's won. That by pulling the money and hitting send, she's taken control. That I'll come undone. That I'll flail, beg, panic, maybe even lash out. But I'm not that man. I didn't respond again, didn't chase her, didn't call her bluff. I just opened a private folder on my hard drive labeled Plan B, something I started over a year ago, quietly, just in case. She has no idea what she just set in motion, no clue the inheritance she touched was already flagged, or that her little power move triggered 3 silent alarms. She walked out with a smirk. But what she doesn't know is this. She had no idea I'd been preparing for this moment longer than she had. She thought she had the upper hand. She didn't know I was already 6 moves ahead. When Michelle moved the inheritance, she thought she was stealing money. What she actually did was trigger a silent alert built into the account 3 years ago. I'd set it up after the first time I caught her snooping through my folders, the moment I stopped believing we were on the same team. Back then, I didn't say a word, just watched. The question wasn't if she'd try something, it was when. So, I built around that, quietly, strategically. The money from my father's estate wasn't just sitting in a joint account anymore. Not really, on the surface, yes. But the structure beneath was different. Nested LLCs. Private custodial oversight. An automatic trigger that fired if large transfers were made without biometric confirmation. The whole thing was locked tighter than she could imagine. So when her email hit my inbox and she proudly announced she'd moved the inheritance, I knew something she didn't. She hadn't succeeded. She'd committed a traceable act of financial tampering on a protected asset. There were layers she never saw because I never showed them to her. Not after I realized she was starting to view my success as her backup plan. The trust attorney called me less than 2 hours after her little heist, not in a panic, but with a calm urgency. "She triggered it," he said. "We flagged and froze the transfer. You'll have an audit report in 48 hours. I thanked him, hung up, and opened the email again. Still there, still smug, still sitting in my inbox like a punchline waiting for a setup. She thought this was a clean break. She thought she got away with it. The next day, her lawyer reached out. The message was short and nervous, wanted to clarify the financial circumstances surrounding recent asset movement. Translation: Michelle thought she could just sweep $250,000 under the rug and bounce. But her lawyer, probably thinking this would be a standard high-conflict divorce, realized quickly that what she did wasn't just greedy, it was potentially criminal. That's the difference between emotion and foresight. She made a move in the middle of a dopamine high, probably sitting cross-legged on some retreat floor, surrounded by women clapping for her bravery. I, on the other hand, had been working in silence, not out of fear, but out of pattern recognition. The warning signs had been there for years, her subtle withdrawals, her growing obsession with independence, her increasing disdain for structure, even as she used that same structure to support every experiment she called a career. I never told her about the asset protections I built. I never had to. That's the beauty of leverage. It works best when it's quiet. The inheritance was only one part. I'd started decoupling the rest months ago. A separate checking account, a solo retirement portfolio. Business assets moved under my LLC, my name only. Michelle didn't see the shift, because I never let it show. I still paid the mortgage, still showed up for dinner, still listened to her talk about soul retrieval and somatic healing as if it wasn't just a dressed-up midlife crisis. Now, though, I let the calm harden. I responded to her lawyer with a single sentence. All relevant documents will be submitted through legal counsel. That was the signal. I called Travis, my attorney, old friend from college, disciplined, lethal when needed. We met for breakfast. I laid out everything, the email, the transfer, the timeline. He took notes like a surgeon preparing for open heart. "We'll keep it quiet," he said, but she just stepped into a legal minefield. I didn't gloat, didn't drink, didn't even raise my voice. I hired a private investigator next, not to catch her cheating. I didn't give a shit at that point, but to build a timeline. I needed hard evidence of intent, motivation. The retreat had a public itinerary, and her social media had already given me timestamps. She'd posted a selfie in front of a canyon 2 hours before the transfer. Perfect. Travis told me to hold the line. "Let her think she's still in control," he said. I nodded. I understood the game. What Michelle didn't realize was this. The more she moved, the more she exposed. Every transaction, every text, every lawyer she looped in was a step closer to documentation. And if she thought I was going to lash out and give her the drama she could weaponize, she was more deluded than I thought. I didn't text, didn't call, didn't even tell friends. I stayed quiet, stoic, composed. But beneath the surface, I was cutting her out of every system she used to depend on. My payroll, my benefits, my business licenses, passwords rotated, banking two-factor changed, access removed. And I did it all without a single ounce of visible rage. She wasn't divorcing a man. She was waking a tactician. Michelle wanted a clean break with a payout. What she got was a locked door, a legal hammer, and a version of me she never planned for. She didn't just leave, she lit the fuse. I didn't stop her. I watched her keep digging the hole. That's the thing about people who think they've won. They always overplay their hand. Michelle thought the money she moved was hers to burn. She thought I'd be scrambling while she lived like a goddess reborn. Instead, I sat back, opened a new folder on my desktop labeled Dissipation, and let the story write itself. 3 days after her email, she flew to Miami. First class. I saw the ticket in the transaction report before she even posted the airport cocktail to her Instagram story. 2 nights later, it was a rooftop dinner with someone I didn't recognize. Guy looked like he sold crypto courses to housewives. She tagged it, "Freedom feels expensive and worth it." I screenshotted everything, forwarded it to Travis. The following week, she leased a luxury apartment in downtown Seattle. Granite counters, water view, $6,800 a month. She never called to ask if we'd be splitting bills. Never even pretended to consider it. She thought she'd just rewrite the rules and I'd play along. But the truth is, she never read the fine print on the game she started. Every cent she spent, every flight she booked, every treat-yourself charge at designer boutiques, it all stacked the case we were building. Dissipation of marital assets is what the court calls it. What I call it is a gift, because the more she celebrated her freedom, the more she documented her recklessness. And I didn't lift a finger to stop her. The trust attorney had already frozen the original inheritance account after her transfer attempt triggered the protocol. She didn't know that either. The account wasn't normal. It was monitored. A condition built into the trust after my father watched too many families get gutted by greed. Any large outbound transfer, especially one routed to a new personal account, triggered internal review and legal contact within hours. So, while Michelle was out in Malibu doing oceanfront yoga and calling herself a phoenix, I was having coffee with Travis and walking through the timeline. Every move she made built our narrative. Every empowered dollar she spent without consent added weight to my side of the scale. Then came the day she got served. I wasn't there, didn't need to be. Travis sent the server to her apartment while she was hosting a brunch for her empowered sisters. She opened the door in a robe, mimosa in hand. And just like that, the party got real quiet. The complaint detailed everything: the inheritance trigger, the flag transaction, the trust's independent protections, her unauthorized account movement, and the now well-documented pattern of frivolous spending since. Her lawyer called again, this time with a different tone, less sure, more cautious. He wanted to negotiate amicably. I didn't answer. Travis did. Michelle tried to call me 4 times that night, texted, left a voicemail that started sweet and ended brittle. I didn't respond to any of it. I wasn't playing that game. Every word she said now came from fear, not clarity. And I wasn't about to give her a lifeline just because she realized the water was deeper than she thought. I wasn't angry anymore. That part burned out weeks ago. What I felt now was colder, sharper, the kind of stillness that comes from knowing you're no longer emotionally invested. I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I wasn't hoping she'd come to her senses. I was documenting, rebuilding, separating the rest of my life from the version of it she thought she could hijack. While she spiraled, I stayed grounded. I hit the gym daily, cleared out the garage, not just the studio I built for her, but all the dead space we never used. I started working later. I poured time into a side acquisition I'd been circling for months, a small logistics firm that would quietly triple my equity in the next 2 years. I got sharper, not softer. And the more I moved forward, the more frantic she became. More posts, more distractions, more digs at me wrapped in fake empowerment captions. It wasn't confidence, it was flailing. She needed to prove to the world she hadn't made a mistake. But the problem was, I wasn't playing in the same arena anymore. I wasn't reacting, I was executing. That's what she never understood. She acted. I waited. She announced. I observed. She burned bridges. I built exits. I didn't need revenge. I needed separation. I needed documentation. I needed time. And she gave it to me without realizing it. Every impulsive move she made gave me cover and clarity. Every withdrawal she made from our future paid dividends into mine. So I let her dig. I watched the dirt fly, the hole deepen, the sides start to cave in around her. She thought my silence meant surrender, that I was licking wounds somewhere in the shadows. She had no idea. She thought silence meant surrender. It meant calculation. When her world started burning, she looked for the man she betrayed. Funny how that works. When she thought she had everything, I was just a shadow in the background, something she'd outgrown. But when the facade cracked and the walls started closing in, suddenly I became the thing she needed again. Not for love, not for regret, just for rescue. By the time her second account was frozen, her lawyer had already switched from confident to cautious. Travis sent me the transcripts. The guy was practically begging to reevaluate the situation amicably before any further legal exposure. I didn't respond. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't have to. Michelle had built a temporary kingdom on illusions, but money you take without right burns hotter than money you earn. And now the fire was licking at her feet. The court filings went through, the ones she assumed would be buried in some quiet file room. But Washington's a community property state, and when someone behaves like a financial arsonist during a separation, the judges don't clap. They calculate. She found that out the day she tried to access her third account, the one tied to a business credit card I'd quietly removed her from months earlier. Denied. Then came the overdraft fees. Then the call from her landlord about missed rent. That's when she started calling me again, first with warmth, then concern, then desperation. I didn't pick up. A few days later, she tried showing up. I was working from home. She must have still had the gate code. I watched from the upstairs window as she walked up the front steps like we were still married, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't tried to gut our future with a mouse click and a motivational quote. She stood at the door for a few minutes, knocked once, then again, then just stood there, her arms crossed like she had a right to wait me out. I didn't move, didn't say a word, just watched. Eventually she left. I think that was the moment she knew. Not that I was angry, not that I wanted payback, but that I was no longer available, not emotionally, not logistically, not in any version of the story she'd tried to rewrite. I went back to my desk and finished the acquisition paperwork I'd been working on. I remember thinking how quiet the house felt, not empty, just precise, like someone had finally cleared the noise. That silence had been a long time coming. I remember the first time I realized Michelle didn't respect me anymore. It wasn't some dramatic argument. It was a Tuesday night, probably 3 years ago. I had just closed a major deal, the kind that changes company trajectories. Anne came home to tell her. She nodded absently from behind her laptop, didn't look up, didn't ask a single question. Just said, "That's great, babe," and kept scrolling through some blog about self-actualization retreats in Costa Rica. I stood there holding takeout and a bottle of wine I bought to celebrate, and she didn't even notice. That's when it shifted, not instantly, but the seed planted. She didn't admire me anymore. She tolerated me. And I think part of her resented the fact that I never collapsed, that I kept showing up, steady, successful, grounded. While she tried on new identities like costumes she kept returning. Now, years later, that distance had calcified into something colder. She used to care about image more than reality, about perception more than truth. But court filings don't give a fuck about image. The judge didn't either. We were only a few weeks into proceedings, but the narrative was already tilting. Not because I made it emotional, I didn't. I made it clinical, documented, sequenced, dated, her spending, her transfers, her timeline of disappearance, her attempts to reconcile only after the legal tide turned. Judges respect facts more than feelings. She started losing ground with every hearing. Her lawyer tried to pivot, tried to blame emotional distress, tried to cry coercion. But the paper trail was too clean, the screenshots too clear, and her own posts too smug to be rewritten now. So I let her sweat. I kept it clean. No outbursts, no public shaming, just filings, motions, calm strategy. I didn't gloat, I didn't attack, I simply removed her from the structure she thought she could steal from. And the irony? She started telling friends I was being cold. But she never asked why. She never traced it back to the morning I stood in our kitchen holding coffee while reading her goodbye email, the one where she told me she deserved more, and quietly emptied an account behind my back. She never traced it back to the years I supported every dream, every shift, every self-discovery phase while she slowly turned the man she married into a safety net she planned to cut free. I wasn't cold, I was just done. It wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. The court ruling came on a Thursday. No drama, no raised voices, no fireworks, just a final stamp of order. Clean, final. The judge's decision laid it out plainly. Her unauthorized transfer was documented, her spending spree undeniable, and her claims of emotional coercion unfounded. My legal team didn't have to tear her down. She did that herself. The inheritance was restored in full, every cent back under my control. She didn't get the half she assumed was hers. She got a reduced settlement, enough to save face, not enough to call it a win. Her lawyer filed the withdrawal notice the next day. Apparently, she'd been ignoring advice and demanding outcomes no one could defend anymore. It's hard to posture when the evidence drags your narrative face down through the dirt. I didn't celebrate, didn't pour a drink, didn't tell anyone right away. I just sat at my desk in the study and let the quiet soak through the walls. Outside, the sun was slipping behind the trees. The same trees I planted 6 years ago, back when I still believed roots meant permanence. She never understood permanence, only attention, reinvention, image over substance. I'd been rebuilding for months, but something about that ruling settled it, like a circuit that finally closed. I wasn't bitter, not even angry anymore. I just felt clean, like I'd finally stepped out of a room that reeked of someone else's smoke. Michelle's last email came 3 days later. Subject line: I made a mistake. 6 words inside. I didn't know what I had. No apology, no ownership, just a soft white flag dressed in regret. She still thought this was a game with rounds, that maybe if she pressed the right emotional button, I'd lean back in. She didn't understand that I was already gone, not from bitterness, from clarity. I didn't reply. She needed that silence more than she needed forgiveness. I opened my journal instead. The one I started the night she left. Not out of sentiment, but discipline. I'd written in it every few days, not about her, not really, but about what I was learning, reclaiming, remembering. The man I'd become wasn't new. He was just returned. I'd let parts of him fade during the marriage, not all at once, not dramatically, just slowly, subtly, under the weight of compromise and emotional accommodation. She didn't kill him. She woke him, and now I was building again. Not to prove anything, not to show her or the world what she lost. Just because that's what I do. I building, I execute, I rise. The new business was already rolling, a lean private firm advising mid-tier logistics companies on sustainable acquisition strategy. No flash, no noise, just smart, consistent profit. My circle had gotten smaller, tighter, more honest. I said no more often, I lifted heavier, slept deeper, thought sharper, and I started writing again. Not for anyone else, not even with an audience in mind, just for me. My mind had space again. Focus, direction without distraction. That night, I printed her original email, the one that started it all. I didn't do it to relive the moment. I did it because closure deserves a ritual. I folded it once, then twice, walked outside, and lit the fire pit. The flames caught fast. Paper curls like it's trying to take back the words, but it's always too late. I watched it burn from a distance. No soundtrack, no epiphany. Just truth rising in smoke. The stars came out like they always do, not brighter, just more noticeable when the noise fades. I sat there for a long time, not thinking about her, thinking about the man I nearly buried for the sake of keeping something broken alive. She didn't break me. She revealed the cracks, and I decided I'd rather rebuild alone than rot slowly beside someone who mistook endurance for love. I've said before, this wasn't revenge. That's too small a word. Revenge is reactive. Reclamation is sovereign. She reached into my life and tried to extract value. What she triggered instead was precision, focus. A version of me that doesn't need to be chosen or validated, just directed. I didn't lose a wife. I lost an illusion, and in its place I gained something far rarer. I gained the version of myself I was never willing to become while I was still busy explaining, pleasing, placating. She thought she broke a man. What she really did was wake one up.